So with two of the biggest videos I've ever done finally dealt with, let's take a look at something a little bit smaller. Our good friends at Atlus have returned with a re-release of one of their newer games that may not involve demon fusing, but still stars high school kids that need to save the world. This is 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, originally a PS4 title that released worldwide in 2020, but has just received a Switch port as of April 2022, which the kind folks at Sega and ATLUS have provided a review copy for me, so major thanks to you both for that, and yeah, do keep me in mind for when Soul Hackers 2 comes out, yeah? Yeah?
Okay, so I should clarify that Atlus are merely the publishers this time around for 13 Sentinels, with the actual developers being Vanillaware. I had never heard of them until now, and yeah, you can probably see why. Not a lot under their belt. Muramasa the Demon Blade is probably the only other game of theirs that I know of, but that's just by name. Aside from that, I've got no knowledge of this game at all. I do see that it's published by Marvelous though, the same people who ported over the No More Heroes games, so might be worth checking out. Funnily enough, 13 Sentinels was also meant to have a Vita port with the PS4 version, but that ended up getting cancelled along with the Vita itself not selling any more units, which is probably for the better honestly, and I'm happy to announce that the Switch port runs perfectly fine. For the most part, the game moves at a pretty steady 60 FPS, but aside from the rare screen tearing, the frame rate does drop a little when the action gets a bit too hectic during the real-time strategy segments. The Switch version is what I'll be basing this video on, but I can imagine the PS4 original works just as well, if not slightly better. The code I was given was American, and I've got a PAL Nintendo Switch, so this was the first time I had to make an American eShop account and play the game that way, making region locking entirely pointless.
Modern gaming's great, isn't it?
13 Sentinels is apparently Vanillaware's first attempt at building a story around a more realistic setting, in addition to tackling the sci-fi genre, time traveling and aliens to be specific. Aegis Rim's director and founder of Vanillaware, George Kamitani, got very tired of doing fantasy games, wanting to try something different, and good on him I say. Always nice to get out of your comfort zone and explore new territory. Weirdly though, the idea for 13 Sentinels was originally used as a basis for a toy line that was meant to be created by an unnamed media company, with the game consisting of a small budget and estimated low sales. Kamitani had already been working on the designs for the characters and the Sentinels themselves that they control, but then he remembered that Atlus had been given the right of first refusal in exchange for funding Vanillaware's other game, Dragon's Crown. This frustrated Kamitani and was unsure whether or not Atlus would approve of what he made, but luckily for him, Atlus not only liked his ideas, they didn't even need to worry about the toy line that was coming too. Everything was left the way it was, including the game's story. Set in 1985 Japan, aliens known as the Daimos that the characters mostly referred to as the Kaiju have already performed an invasion on Earth, while of course in true Japanese fashion, 13 high schoolers and their giant robot Sentinels defend their planet from the evil life forms. But both the Daimos and Sentinels are also capable of traveling through time. While a majority of the characters are from 1985, a couple of them are actually from 1945, just before the Second World War ended, and some of the other characters are really from the future, decades after the Daimos attacked and destroyed the world. These people jump through time via this gate to try and stop the invasion from spreading too far, but the Kaiju catch on to that and try to stop our heroes from stopping them, and it turns into a confusing cycle. You experience the story through the perspectives of the 13 Sentinel pilots, watching them come to grips with everything that's happening around them. And yes, there is a reason why they're all naked whenever they engage in combat, and it's pretty lame. Their clothes would cause severe pressure whilst inside the Sentinels? It's like when Hideo Kojima tried to justify stripping quiet. We all know why you really did it. Just to name a few, these include characters that may contain a false identity, being blackmailed by the SIU to go undercover, fish out of water scenarios after traveling to the future, discovering a scout robot that may have some answers about the Daimos invasion, and an amnesiac who has no idea who they are or what's happening to them because this is a Japanese game. 13 Sentinels means 13 different stories for 13 different characters. And in order to do the actual gameplay where the Sentinels fight against the aliens, you have to watch a whole lot of cutscenes until you made enough progression in the story. It takes around 3 hours before you're able to freely swap between continuing the characters' plots and the real-time strategy gameplay, but later missions will be locked until you've seen enough of the story, so I find it's best to strike a balance between the two, so that you're not doing too much of the story or too much of the gameplay. Clearing just one of the character's stories though can take several more hours before each of them figure out how to activate their Sentinels and join the fight by the time you do the gameplay. Usually by flicking wherever they got shot by the character Megumi, which I have to ask, what happens if they accidentally do that in an everyday situation? Like if I got shot in the head and wiped sweat off of it after a hard day of chores, would I still summon my Sentinel and potentially crush any buildings nearby me before I have to book it out of there? Maybe there's a hint of willpower that needs to be added in too, I don't know. I should mention as well that the stories are all told in a non-linear fashion, which I'll admit does make the overall plot hard to follow with what's going on sometimes. We frequently swap between the past, present, and future that it can be difficult for me to remember which characters are going to be the good guys in the future, who are going to be the bad guys, which characters in the present are really other characters in the future, who's trying to sabotage what, who will live, and who will die. It's a very interesting plot altogether, sort of crossing War of the Worlds with the Terminator, both of which the game does reference in some way, so I get the feeling that was the intention, and the graphics and animation style are top notch. This is a gorgeous looking game, flawlessly blending 2D sprites on a 3D plane. I'm reminded a lot of Octopath Traveler with not only its looks, but also how the story is structured and focusing on individual heroes. And the sound design, my god is the sound design good, specifically with the Sentinels and Kaiju. If you can play this game with a soundbar and subwoofer or anything better, definitely do so. The loud booming echoes from these hulking beasts really give you a sense of how huge and powerful they are, and how overwhelmingly small you are. Again, to call back to War of the Worlds, at least with the 2005 remake, it's a lot like how the tripods made those ear-bleeding noises as they arrived to instantly inflict panic on all the civilians. I really love that 13 Sentinels does something similar, but Jesus is it also quite long for what it is. My final time came to 34 hours with all of the characters' storylines completed and beating the final mission, with post-game missions unlocked after the credits roll. Honestly, that's probably my biggest complaint with Aegis Rim. As interesting as the story and characters are, I think it's too large in length for its own good. Spending 75% of the game just watching the story unfold, and another 25% fending off Kaiju. The artwork is amazing and the voice acting is great, but after a while I get a little tired of being stuck watching the game rather than playing it. The most amount of control you'll get to do in the story sections, aside from running to your next destination, is go through any keywords you picked up through dialogue in a character's so-called thought cloud. Just call them keywords, that's much easier to grasp. With these keywords, you can then have the character reflect on them to either remind you what's what, or sometimes get the story rolling, while occasionally a character may say something that you can then respond with using one of the keywords, indicated by an X above their heads. There's not much thought involved in picking the right answers, however. It's usually enough to simply scroll through what you've got until you see you can respond with that particular keyword. Some parts of a character's story can be a little trickier when you're introduced to multiple branches, where each one offers you a new keyword, and you have to use them for the next branch. But if the story doesn't go the way it's meant to, you'll then be booted back to the character selection screen and have to try again. I only got stuck maybe a few times with these kind of moments, like when the character Ogata starts suffering from Groundhog Day syndrome and keeps reliving the same scenario again and again until he figures out what he's supposed to do. But a lot of the time you only have to just press Y to bring out the story branches and see what keyword is needed where. If you're playing the game in short bursts, then I think all of this is perfectly manageable, even with 13 Sentinels being as long as it is. But if you're doing heavier sessions because, say, you need to make a video for a YouTube channel to justify your free code, then this gets pretty repetitive after a while. To be fair to the game though, there may be a hint of bias on my end since visual novel games tend to be hit or miss with me personally. I don't mind if a game can be chatty a lot of the time. Hell, Metal Gear Solid is one of my favorite series of games. But those titles, at least some of the older ones, only last around 8 to 10 hours as opposed to the 30 plus hours Aegis Rim has. If we're talking specifically Japanese visual novel games, I usually prefer that they give me a little something for sitting and listening to all the info dump. A small reward that could benefit me during the actual gameplay. You can probably guess where I'm going with this. Alright, to use a different example without mentioning the dreaded P word, I'll point to the Danganronpa series. Those games are also littered with dialogue and have that visual novel stillness to it you normally see. However, not only does Danganronpa make up for it by presenting itself in the style of a pop-up book to stand out, but all of the searching and exploring you do provide clues as to who the next killer is. That way, by the time you get to the class trials where the major twists and turns usually happen, you can use everything you found to your advantage by catching the murderer in the act through simple but effective gameplay. 13 Sentinels gets the style, presentation, and acting down amazingly, but the only reward you get for doing the story is getting rid of the roadblock stopping you from playing more of the game. The characters already have perks and abilities during combat, so why not go one step further and add some plot relevant ones to really screw over the Daimos? Again, I realize this is more of a personal problem of mine, and I'm sure a lot of other people might be fine with what's there already. This is just something I would have liked to see. And like I said, even though the story can be very complicated and chock full of exposition with big conspiracies, deadly androids, time travel, and space, I enjoyed it enough on my first run. I imagine this is a game that was meant to be played multiple times to pick up on details you didn't catch before, or using prior knowledge to put more of the pieces together when viewing the plot more than once. With 13 Sentinels being such a long game, however, that would be quite a commitment to make, which I don't feel I'm ready to do right now.
In case you may be wondering if I'll be talking about the plot in its entirety, or at the very least do an extended thoughts video like I traditionally do with newer Persona games, I unfortunately won't be. Not only would my brain overload like the characters do during gameplay, just trying to figure out what the hell's going on between 13 individual characters, let alone write it all down on paper, but I also don't feel comfortable discussing the narrative in full when I don't understand 100% everything. I'll leave that to Nam's Compendium to sort out. I'm sure he's going through the game at some point. Godspeed, my friend.
I can at the very least tell you my most and least favorite aspects of the story. Best character for me was Natsuno Minami, second place tying between Yuki Takayama and Nenji Yogato, with my least favorite character being Renya Gota. Sorry to any fans out there, but this dude just bore the hell out of me. Most favorite storyline was probably Juro Karabe's, and again maybe Yuki's as a close second, with my least favorite being Iori Fuyusaka's. I swear half of her storyline is deciding what food to get, and it makes me hungry every time. Strawberry crepe sounds amazing, I want some now, damn it. You know what, Takatoshi Hijiyama's wasn't the most exciting either. It's cool that there's gay representation done okay as far as I could tell, certainly not perfect, but at least it's not a Catherine full body situation again. And they also tackle the issue of being unsure of your sexuality at a young age. But the actual storyline for Hijiyama was a lot of the same, I felt. Do I like this guy that sometimes disguises himself as a girl, and how many times do I have to grab a yakisoba pan before I continue? One of Hijiyama's chapters is almost nothing but searching for loose change to even buy one of these yakisoba pans, and yeah, it's about as engaging as it sounds. Ryoko Shinanome's story wasn't the best for gameplay purposes either, because she constantly gets headaches that blur her vision if she doesn't take her medication for too long, so you have to keep stopping and using the thought cloud to take your pills before carrying on. That can get a bit annoying. Natsuno kind of has that too by forcing you to manually put her accompanying scout robot in her PE bag every time. I get he's gotta hide somewhere, I can assume the bag will always be the best place, you don't need to make me do it so often. Small nitpicks aside, how's the real-time strategy aspect of 13 Sentinels? Fairly good, and what a time for me to play this game too, whilst currently in the middle of a Fire Emblem marathon. Before starting a mission, you have to decide which of up to 6 characters will be on offense and who will be on defense, the latter of which shoot any Daimos heading towards your home base. But the strike team also get a little fatigued after each mission. If their stamina reaches 0, their mental state will be in jeopardy and be out of commission until the next wave of Daimos you fight. You can at any point instantly recover the character's staminas, but that'll reset your win streak from consecutively completing missions, which means you won't earn as many points to upgrade everybody's abilities and stats. The more missions you do in a row without resetting everyone's stamina, the more upgrade points you receive. Each character has their own unique abilities based on their fighting style, but you do have a limit on how many you can carry at once. A lot of these abilities are the exact same between some characters, so if one person's down for the count, then you'll always have a backup, but you'll need to be sure you cover yourself for the appropriate situations. Ogata and Hijiyama, for instance, are more of the brute force types, so close quarters combat is ideal for them, while Natsuno focuses a lot on shooting missiles and lasers at a distance, and Iori can be made into a healer should you wish to do so. After purchasing an ability for a character, you can further enhance its power and coverage by spending more upgrade points until it reaches its maximum potential, sometimes unlocking brand new skills on top of that. But if you're happy with what you have for the moment, you can always use those extra points to improve the stats of each character. I did have to do a small bit of grinding to beat the final mission, even after maxing out some characters' abilities and making a start on their stat buffs, because this is where the last of the Daimos really try to take you out, and the screen gets plastered with tons of explosions and particle effects, and the frame rate drops even lower. Just as well, there were some missions I failed to get myself an S rank for and try again, possibly the only bit of replayability for me if I don't feel like trudging through the story again, and getting S ranks and fulfilling bonus objectives like having specific characters in your current squad unlocks more files for you to spend mystery points on that you also get for finishing missions. These are basically one long glossary to catch yourself up on certain details of the story, which I think I could definitely do with. While not having as many to upgrade as the characters, there are additionally meta skills that can be used once the meter on the bottom left is filled up. The EMP is what you'll have to start with, slightly damaging all enemies on screen, but more skills can be bought as well as more uses, with 4 being the maximum. The ones I ended up using the most aside from the EMP were restoring some of everybody's health or everybody's EP, which are needed to use the character's abilities in the first place, the most powerful ones needing much more EP to use. The super missiles may cost a damn fortune, but they greatly helped in the long run by doing so much damage in a good amount of space. And if I know my Metroid games, super missiles will always be your best friend. You'll certainly want to make sure everyone's health is decent enough too, because losing anybody in battle will result in an instant game over. The lose conditions already include preventing your home base from getting too damaged, but keeping each character alive and kicking plays a huge part too. If a Sentinel's health fully depletes, then their pilots are immediately ejected, leaving them totally exposed to the Deimos, so you then need to order them to run somewhere safe until their Sentinels are repaired and you can summon them again. The characters are seriously squishy too, and during the second half it gets pretty difficult to find a spot with little Deimos, so that may as well be a game over there and then. Surprisingly though, I only lost a few times throughout my whole playthrough. I found the first half to be pretty easy even after the tutorials stopped coming in, but I had to think a little more once all of those missions were done and the kaiju were becoming more aggressive. Maybe it's my time with Fire Emblem lately that's giving me the advantage, but I'd say apart from a couple of missions, the difficulty is pretty standard, and there are other difficulties you can try out if you want to. I had been playing on normal mode and didn't have too many problems. It's all just a matter of what attacks you use, having my Sentinels defend themselves if necessary to get a little EP back, and considering where to move each Sentinel with luckily no restrictions, unlike Fire Emblem, apart from ground units needing to take the roads while air units can fly anywhere they want. As a bonus, I can make sure to attack a kaiju from behind and inflict slightly more damage. That's all there really is to the RTS segments of 13 Sentinels. It's not the most complex I played in games like these, but it does the job perfectly fine. And I do get some satisfaction with each explosion I hear from a kaiju and seeing a whole bunch of damage numbers fill the screen. This portion of gameplay did get some criticism when 13 Sentinels first came out on PS4 for not being all that new or impressive, and I guess I can see where they're coming from with it, but I think it's fine. Again, maybe not the most unique, but I like it enough. The story and art style is clearly where most of the attention went anyway, and it's likely what interests most players when it comes to 13 Sentinels. As I mentioned before, it's a cool enough plot to experience and see from every character's point of view, but there were a number of scenes I would have trimmed down or straight up cut to improve the flow a bit. It's over 30 hours long, but I don't feel it really needed to be. 20 hours at most in my opinion, but not 30. And lest we forget, this is also a $60 Switch port we're looking at here, and physical PS4 copies aren't too easy to come by anymore, with digitals not being much better in price compared to the Switch version. That is a pretty big pill for me to swallow personally. I think $40 should have been the maximum price to pay for it. Maybe wait for a sale if you want to play this game, because it is a very intriguing one and I can't think of too many other games like 13 Sentinels. You'll certainly get a lot out of it, but $60 worth? Hell no. That's the same price Breath of the Wild had at launch and Persona 5, another Atlus property. Arguably much bigger games that deserve their price tags.
I nevertheless thank Sega and ATLUS once again for sending me a review code and offering me the chance to try 13 Sentinels out. Please go have a look at it whenever you have the chance, just know what you're getting into beforehand and judge for yourself whether or not you think the price and length are warranted. Right, I better get back to the Fire Emblem marathon with only a few games left to go, and the next one to talk about is the last 3DS entry in the series, Fire Emblem Echo Shadows of Valentia. I pray this won't be as big of a video as the Fates one, but we'll see. Until then, I'll see you all later. Thanks very much for watching, stay safe, stay healthy, and take care of yourselves. Our good friends at ATLUS have returned with a... Our good friends of ATLUS... Our good friends of ATLUS... Not our good friends have ATLUS. They don't have ATLUS. Nobody has ATLUS. Our good friends at ATLUS have returned with a re-release. Damn it. Originally a PS4 title that came out